Me. This is my Game Theory project proposal on titled Collaborative Strategy Game between South Korea and US as means for denuclearization in North Korea. It's quite a mouthful, but pretty much how South Korea and US can work together to denuclearize. So the inspiration for this idea came from a project that Dr. Zhuye Ye and Dr. Jun Swang, our wonderful professor, did, titled Denuclearization or Not, a multiple player sequential game model. And pretty much it's a sequential decision game, so North Korea makes a decision to denuclearize or not, and then a joint group decision between US, Japan, and South Korea. And then after that, group decision of China and Russia. And yeah, so one component of the sequence of results was that North Korea actually denuclearizes. So that was actually one of the optimal choices in terms of utility. I do have to kind of reread that, but that was what I got from it. So North Korea actually denuclearizes. So the objective for this project is to put a collaboration subgame between South Korea and the United States that could in fact incentivize North Korea to denuclearize. So we want to go over a quick agenda, some history of the U.S.-South Korea alliance, and then some notable tensions that have come about, mainly over military spending on U.S. troop deployment. So, splitting the cost for U.S. Troops stationed in South Korea. And then my proposed decision model, sequential decision model. So we're going to consider South Korea and U.S.'s best interests in terms of their choices. And then we're going to see the joint decision that could, in fact, incentivize North Korea to maybe denuclearize. Right, so a little timeline, a little history. So 1953, the Mutual Defense Treaty was enacted. So this is pretty much a partnership between where U.S. supplies U.S. troops in South Korea in exchange for promoting its interests in the East Asia region. And yeah, in 1953, Korea had just gone through a civil war with North Korea, and the country was in ruins. And the idea was that U.S. would have troops there, in both their interests. And yeah, I think at the time U.S. is sort of paying for the troops, but in 1980s, South Korea had become quite an industrialization as well, and so the Special Measures Agreement was enacted where South Korea steadily pays a larger portion for U.S. Troop deployment each year. U.S. was thinking, hey, why are we paying so much? Why aren't they paying their fair share, kind of thing. And then jump forward to the modern day, we have South Korea's industrialized considerably, and in very extreme cases, U.S. has threatened to withdraw troops unless South Korea pays more. And in the very extreme case, President Trump actually asked for a 300% increase in annual payment for 1 year, which kind of started this whole tension between the payments. And so we sort of want to consider South Korea, what's in the best interest for both South Korea and the U.S. So in terms of South Korea, it's advantageous to have U.S. troops in the region just to fend off against North Korea because of U.S.'s military power and presence, their advancement in military technology, and just the I guess the power and threat that they could propose to North Korea. On the other hand, South Korea, it's tough to pay, too much of an increase for U.S. troop deployment each year. They want that steady increase that they've been having since the special measure agreements. But in some cases, U.S. defense attorneys are saying, or defense contractors are saying, hey, you should pay a larger portion. No, it's not good enough. And yeah, in the extreme case that the U.S. does withdraw troops, South Korea could also, create. They have the tools and manufacturing material to create their own nuclear arsenal in about 6 months, I believe experts say. It probably wouldn't be allowed due to non-proliferation agreements between all these nations, but it's an option that they have. In terms of U.S., what's in their best interest? Of course, they want other foreign countries to pay more for their U.S. troops being deployed there. Just you know, they don't want too much of their expenditure just for paying their troops in foreign areas. And on the other hand, though, U.S. doesn't. Um, sorry. On the other hand, it's probably good to have U.S. troops stationed in Korea just for that interest that they had. Um, that treaty that they had where U.S. could have a sort of a influence in the East Asia region. Um, yeah, so these are the considerations for both our players. And then now that we consider, sort of their individual tensions and decisions, we want to take into consideration North Korea's perspective. So the Allies' joint decision against them. So this is Kim Sung. He's a UN ambassador from North Korea. And then in one of the forums, he was saying how sanctions being placed on North Korea was viewed as a threat on their end, and also joint trainings between U.S. South Korea troops, as well as provision of military technology to South Korea, is means for them to create their own and develop their own nuclear arsenal. And so these are some of the questions that on their end, and whether it's true or not, it's what they've said, and then it's important to consider, if the joint trainings did stop between U.S. and South Korea, would North Korea actually, drop their nuclear development? It's not likely, but it's a choice we have to consider. Right. So this is sort of the sequential decision that model that I came up with. So the first one is should U.S. keep its troops in the South Korea region? So yes or no. And then if it is no, should South Korea develop their own nuclear weapons as defense? Yes or no? And that would end there. And if they do choose yes here, the second question would be, should South Korea pay a higher contribution per year for U.S. troops? Yes or no? And I think an additional thing we could do is maybe build an optimization model to find sort of how much South Korea is willing to pay and how much U.S. is willing to accept in terms of like agreement for cost agreement for a U.S. troop deployment. And whether this is yes or not, because it was yes here, we'll go to question 3, and then the same question 3. So should U.S. and South Korea continue joint training as well as U.S. weapons provision? Yes or no? And so question 3 is kind of a joint decision that takes into account what North Korea has said. So yes or no? And if it's yes here, should U.S. South Korea continue to place sanctions on North Korea? Yes or no? And so this is sort of the tentative decision model that I came up with. And based on research, it could be likely it'll be yes, yes, yes here, and no here. So it's probably in their best interest to keep troops in South Korea as well as provide the payments to maintain good relations. And then you want to be able to have joint training and just keep working together to defend, to be an actual threat to North Korea. If this stopped, North Korea could have an upper ground in some sense. And then after having that advantage, stop the sanctions, maybe listen to North Korea and like help them out in some ways in aiding. So yeah, this is the tentative decision tree that I've had. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you guys so much for listening.